Welcome to the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randle and Gus Kearns.
If you could pick any college basketball job to have as a head coach, Virginia Tech would be at the top of the list. Why would Virginia Tech be there? Well, let's see. They're in the ACC. They have a strong athletic program. It is primarily a football school first, I would say, but they've had tremendous success lately in basketball, although the success I would not say is expected. The pressure to win at Virginia Tech is not as high as other ACC schools like Duke, North Carolina, etc. So if they can pull some upsets along the way and get a couple recruits, they can really surprise and make a move. And that's what they've done. Folks, do you realize Virginia Tech has beaten Duke 3 consecutive times on its home floor? 3 times in a row. How many schools would you say in the Mike Krzyzewski era at Duke have a 3-game home winning streak at some point over the Blue Devils? Not many. Virginia Tech does. So when Buzz Williams left to go to Texas A&M and Virginia Tech looked for their next coach, they looked into the state of South Carolina to Wofford College, and they picked Mike Young. Mike Young was an assistant, longtime assistant at Wofford for 13 years, and then ascended to the head position in 2002, where he served for 18 seasons as the head coach of the Wofford Terriers. He took a program that pretty much did nothing and turned them into back-to-back SoCon regular season champions in 2009, 2010, and 2010, 2011. So in many ways, he got Wofford on the map. And now he comes to Virginia Tech, but that doesn't mean he comes without questions. Here comes Mike Young. Did a nice little job in the SoCon. Can he really step up to the ACC? Was he just a product of some fast-paced three-point shooting with some really great shooters like Fletcher McGee? And is that style going to really work in the ACC? And so coming into this season, there were not high expectations, but they got off to as good a start as anyone could have hoped with a new coach like Mike Young. Virginia Tech started 6-0, including a win over Michigan State, 71-66. They entered the month of January at 10-3, going 1-1 in the ACC with a win over Clemson and a loss to Duke. And after that, they battled. They battled despite losing recruits. They battled despite being in a transitional year. They battled despite probably not being thought to do much by the fans in Young's first year. But now Mike Young has it going, and he proved that he can coach. So we're going to bring in MikeBarber from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Mike has joined the Screener podcast on several occasions, joined us a few weeks ago to talk about Virginia basketball, and now he's back to talk about the Hokies. Mike's going to tell us how he thinks Mike Young has things going in the right direction. That despite losing Landers Nolley, who went to Memphis and now is declared for the NBA draft, they have a strong group of young players returning and a really great recruiting class. The Virginia Tech Hokies have a tremendous home court advantage, and they always have athletes. And if Mike Young can recruit, we know he can coach. We know he can X and O. We saw it this year. We saw it in a double overtime win against North Carolina at home. We saw it in a win over Michigan State. So if he gets buy-in and they get athletes, watch out for the Hokies. So we're going to bring Mike in now to talk about the Virginia Tech Hokies basketball program, recap of last year, and preview of next year, year 2 under Mike Young. Follow Mike, fantastic follow on Twitter. Please follow him at RTD_MikeBarber. Let's bring Mike in and talk about Hokie Nation. The Screener podcast season review series rolls on here, and we head down to Blacksburg, Virginia, where we're going to talk Virginia Tech Hokies basketball. A lot of things going on in the ACC. Virginia Tech, new coach this year. Want to talk about how that develops, some players coming, some players going. Always a huge home court advantage in a Virginia Tech program that has really come on the last few years heading into this season. So we bring back on the podcast. He did such a great job with Virginia. We're bringing him back on here. MikeBarber from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, fantastic writer, amazing job. Follow him on Twitter at RTD_MikeBarber. Bring him in here for a few minutes to talk about Virginia Tech Hokies basketball. Mike, great to have you back. It's like Groundhog Day. Nothing's changed, but we're going to talk about a different team.
I enjoy it. Any chance we get in these times to talk a little college basketball is fun.
Absolutely. And listen, changes with Virginia Tech. Buzz Williams there did a fantastic job for his 5 seasons, ended in 2018, 2019 with that amazing game against Duke where they almost upset the Blue Devils there in the Sweet 16. And this year they bring in Mike Young. So Mike Young comes over from Wofford, tremendous success. Coming into the year, talk about how you thought it was going to go. Transitional year, new coach, new system. Of course, the Hokies always battle tested, always play Duke tough as well in the ACC. So talk about those preseason expectations.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I had very low expectations, and that's not a knock on Mike Young. I think he's a phenomenal X's and O's coach. I think he's one of the best in the game right now in terms of preparing a team, putting together a game plan, that kind of stuff. I just looked at a roster that lost their top 5 scorers, that had a bunch of guys leave that were seniors, a guy leave early for the draft, some guys transfer out. It just didn't look like they had the pieces in place to compete this past season. Again, I think Mike Young, great hire. I saw good things for them in the future. And then, they ended up being a lot more competitive and in a surprising way than what I anticipated. I thought they would struggle to score. I thought they would struggle with turnovers. I thought they would struggle to defend. And I thought they would really struggle once they got into ACC play with their lack of height and their lack of depth. Now, a lot of those things did kind of happen, right? But they still found ways to compete. And if I'm a Virginia Tech fan, I'm ecstatic with the way year 1 went. If I'm a neutral observer, which is what I am, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with not just the foundation that Mike Young laid for the future, but what he was able to do this year.
The overall outcome and your expectations were mine as well. And then, because they played so well to start the year and the adjustment was so quick, they started off 6-0 in non-conference with that huge win over Michigan State. I mean, maybe, Mike, that was almost unrealistic, that game, because people then thought, hey, wait a minute, maybe we underestimated this team and the impact is going to be great right away. They followed that up with 3 tough games there, Dayton, BYU, and Duke. So maybe, 10-3 as they got out of the non-conference with the 1 game against Duke heading into January, but maybe unrealistic expectations after that great Michigan State win.
Yeah, and I don't want to call it fool's gold because they beat Michigan State because they listened to their coach, and their coach with a few extra days can put together a great game plan. Michigan State, I don't think, had really rounded into form yet, but certainly talent and depth-wise had a major advantage. I think that was an impressive victory. It did maybe raise the expectations a little bit. I thought the first half of the Duke game was another example of great game planning by Mike Young, great buy-in from his team, great execution, and then Duke being better in the second half was able to overcome it. And I don't want to sit here and make it sound like I'm saying Mike Young did this with smoke and mirrors, but he kind of pulled a few rabbits out of hats this year, and I think that's a great sign for Tech going forward. But you're right, that beginning, the Michigan State win, 5-3 to open up ACC play. There was a point in the season that people were talking about an NCAA bid for this team, and it wasn't crazy. Based on the resume, based on what was ahead of them, and based on the fact that, bluntly, it was kind of a down year around the ACC, there was a point in the year, about a month into league play, that you could say, I think Virginia Tech has a chance at an at-large bid, and I wouldn't have called you crazy.
And how did the team develop throughout the year? I mean, there's a learning curve here. We can get into Landers Nolley, who has now decided to go to the NBA after transferring to Memphis. There's a lot of an allegiance to players when they get recruited to their coach. And it may not necessarily be a negative about the coach coming in. It's just the fact that this is not what I expected, whether or not, and Mike Young is an excellent coach, whether or not that they believe in the talent of the coach coming in. Talk about that, where it went through the season, ups and downs, new coach, and of course, Nolley deciding to leave. But I think maybe that was inevitable regardless of what coach came in.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think certainly it's a big change from Buzz to Mike Young in a lot of ways, in X's and O's and style of play, in their personality. And honestly, I mean, Buzz was sort of high profile and Mike Young was kind of under the radar, right? He'd done a great job at Wofford, but he wasn't, the hot name in college coaching. He wasn't this up and coming star. So if you bought into some of what Buzz was selling, maybe it didn't seem like a natural fit with Mike Young. Now, what I heard from the players was, when they got into the gym with Mike Young, he won them over. Basically, they came in and were like, I don't know. I know he was pretty good at Wofford. We'll see. This is very different. They got in the gym with Mike Young and said, this guy knows basketball. And if you're a basketball player, and if some of your older guys like Wabisa Beatty, PJ Horn, if they buy in, which they did, that kind of sets the tone a little bit. And I think that's what happened. I think Mike came in. He impressed them with his approach, his basketball knowledge. They said, okay, we're going to buy in and do what this guy tells us. And especially early, I mean, you saw a team playing 6 freshmen, a good number of minutes, right? 6 freshmen played at least 10 minutes a game. And they didn't turn the ball over a lot, especially early. They didn't have defensive missed assignments early. They executed well at the end of games, especially early. I think they did hit a wall because they were playing so many young kids. I think they did get a little bit of physical, but emotional and mental fatigue. But I think they bought in because Mike Young won them over with his X's and O's prowess.
It's a great point about the turnovers. They were 4th in the nation, according to Ken Pom, in offensive turnover percentage. That's 4th in the nation, not in the conference. 3rd in offensive steals. So they're not turning the ball over at all. And what I was impressed with the Hokies this year is even with the transition, they competed well. They were 13-4, 4-2 in the ACC, like going into the game against Syracuse on January 18th. And then even their game, the majority of their games, they're very close. Lost to Syracuse by 2 at home. Beat North Carolina 2 overtimes at home, which was a huge win, I think, by the way. And then battled. They had the run in February. They lost at home in overtime to BC. They won at home over Pittsburgh. Then 3 overtimes against Miami at home. They ended up playing Virginia home and only lost by 3. So really, as a young team, like you said, with a lot of changes, they were competing deep into February, which I think is a great sign for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we keep coming back to the way they did it. They played basketball like a smart veteran basketball team, despite leaning on the freshmen. They took good shots. They just didn't look like a bunch of rookies. They didn't look like a bunch of freshmen who weren't quite sure what to do. They looked like a well-prepared, intelligent veteran basketball team that didn't quite have the ammunition, the firepower to, really win in the ACC. But there weren't many games. I think the road game at Boston College where I don't know if they were in a funk or what, they didn't really move the ball. They didn't look good defensively. But other than that, there wasn't a game that I thought, geez, they don't look like they can compete. And, with almost, and I know we'll get into it, almost all these guys coming back, that's a great sign.
Yeah, talk about those players coming back because you have some nice recruits coming in. You have Diarra coming over from Kansas State. So really Mike Young finally starting to put his thumbprint here heading into year 2. And you have a young group now with experience coming back that when they don't have experience, they're going to make mistakes, but solid core guys returning before we get into the new guys.
Yeah, the top 4 scorers were freshmen. 5 of the top 6 were freshmen. And like I said, 6 freshmen playing 10 minutes or more. Now, Landers Nolley, the leading scorer, he opted to leave, and we can get into the whole mess that is Landers Nolley. But Tyrese Radford was the best player on the team coming down the stretch. Redshirt freshman, kind of a wing type player, very aggressive going to the rim, great rebounder, an effort rebounder. We've all been watching the Last Dance, and he's got some similarity on the glass to a Dennis Rodman. He just seems to have a feel for where the ball's going to come off the rim, and he has a tremendous motor to go get it. But he's not one-dimensional, man. I mean, he can score, he can drive, he can pass. So I think Tyrese Radford, his emergence late in the year is a great sign. Naheem Aline is a lethal outside shooter. I think he's got some ability to get to the rim. And again, he got better and better. And then I thought a lot of the young kids kind of hit the wall. They had played so many games and so many minutes. And I know every time I say that, people are like, well, they play so many games in AAU, but you don't play defense really in AAU. You're only playing half the floor. When you're playing in the ACC, those minutes are real minutes. Those minutes are grueling. And I think it caught up with all these kids. But Jaylen Cohen, the young point guard out of North Carolina, he really looked like an ACC level player, a kid who was unafraid to take big shots. So when you think about the core they're bringing back, the way they played, the way they were coached, the way they bought in, there's a lot of talent there. And like I said, with the exception of Nolley, it's all returning.
Radford really came on there. He's such a critical piece, and I love that comparison. Of course, everyone now watching The Last Dance, so that's really topical. But yeah, absolutely. And Aline, 38.9% from beyond the arc. So you have good shooters coming back. They were 35% as a team. Get into Nolley a little bit. Obviously, prolific scorer, 15 points, 5 rebounds, 31%, 78% from the free throw line. What was the dynamic with him as the year went on? And with him gone, does this now allow the other freshmen, as they're moving forward next year, to even take a larger step forward? Was he the one everyone deferred to? And now maybe, with his absence, you can sort of develop as a team better?
Yeah, he certainly was. He was the guy that they wanted the ball in his hands late in the shot clock. Now, I'm never one of those guys who thinks when you lose your most talented player, you get better because of all the other things.
Addition by subtraction, right? Yeah. I
don't buy it, but I do buy your point, which is that this allows for guys who they had the ability for bigger roles. They naturally fit into bigger roles. And Virginia Tech, let's face it, became a little bit predictable, right? If the ball's always going to be in Landers Nolley's hand, and Landers Nolley, talented player, he's not Michael Jordan, to go back to The Last Dance. So if the ball's always in his hands, you can stop that. And I think Virginia Tech ran into that, and I don't think they needed to. I think they had other pieces on the floor. Nolley's an interesting kid. He played well. He played hard. He played with a lot of passion. He didn't like having to defend the 4, which with this lineup and this roster, he had to a lot. When I see comments from his dad about playing on the wing and playing the perimeter, well, offensively he did. And offensively, the ball was in his hands. And I don't mean this to dog the kid, but growing up, a guy who took a ton of shots to get his points was called a ball hog. Somewhere along the way, we've PC'd it up like we do nowadays, and we've PC'd it up to say he's a volume shooter, right? He's got to take a lot of shots, but he's going to get you the points. But a volume shooter means he's not that efficient. He's not passing the ball. He's taking a ton of shots. That doesn't really fit with great team basketball that Mike Young, I think, wants to employ. People look at Mike Young's Wofford teams and they see all the 3-point shots. This wasn't undisciplined, right? This wasn't like the old VMI style where you dribble up and you take the first available 3 and there's math behind it. That's not what this was. This was take a good open shot and make it. And that's what Mike Young wants Virginia Tech to be. I don't know that Landers Nolley fit in. I know that Landers Nolley's dad didn't think he fit in, and that can be a big issue. So then there was Landers in the transfer portal. Then there was Landers going to Memphis. Now there's Landers going to the NBA. You certainly wish him luck. He was a class act in that after every game, win or lose, he would come out and talk to the media and answer questions. So I certainly wish him well, but it probably wasn't a great fit at this point for him at Virginia Tech.
I'm just curious, Mike, any insight as to why the transfer to Memphis and then the NBA? Why the 2-step process?
Well, I think that there was a hope, and there still may be a hope about the one-time NCAA transfer rule.
Okay.
And I think if Landers can play next year at Memphis, not have to sit out, I think his dad was really smitten with Penny Hardaway. I think he envisions Landers in many ways as a similar big guard, big point kind of player like Penny was. So I think there was an allure there. And again, I think if he's got a chance to play, and I don't think we're at the deadline yet, I think he would consider that. But I think if he doesn't have the ability to play, if he would have to sit out, he's not sitting out next season. He'll try to jump to the NBA, whether it's the developmental league or however he gets there.
So we look at the incoming players next year, first recruiting class here really overall for Mike Young, given a fair shake here with a year under his belt. Solid class, 22nd overall by 24/7 Sports, 6th in the ACC, of course, very difficult, but 3 right off the bat here. And of course, talk about transfers. We have 2 transfers coming in as well. But overall, Mike, I think these are solid players, including 1 4-star recruit that can make a difference, or 2 4-star recruits rather, that can make a difference right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, and again, I mean this respectfully, but that was a question about Mike Young. And it got worse when the first player he kind of signed at Virginia Tech was Hunter Couture, who had been committed to him at Wofford. Because people said 2 things. They said Hunter Couture isn't good enough to play in the ACC, and I think that was proven wrong this year. I think Hunter Couture can have a very good ACC career. He's a lethal outside shooter and a really good player. And 2, they said, Mike Young can't recruit ACC level talent. And I think that was quickly proven false when he followed up the Couture signing with Jaylen Cohen. I think he's taken even another step forward with this class. And I think it's important because I keep raving about Mike as an X's and O's coach, as a preparer, as a game plan guy, and that's all true. But you got to have the horses to run the race in the ACC. You just do. There are too many good teams. And when you think about, this class, and you think about Joe Bamasil, the kid from right here for me in the Richmond area, he's a 4-star guard. You think about Darius Maddox, he's a 4-star wing, also a Virginia kid. That's 2 4-star players out of the state. That's huge, right? To get a player that good is important. To get a player from in your state is that important, to do it twice. So I really like the class. And then when you think about, the K-State transfer that he's added in Carter Diarra, a scoring point guard. And I asked Mike this last week, they've got a point guard returning in Wabisa Bede, who's one of the best perimeter defenders in the ACC. Not a tremendous scorer, but a good ball handler, a good on-floor leader, and a phenomenal defender. Can you play those two together? And Mike said, yeah, I've never thought it was a problem to have a couple of point guards on the floor. And I think you're going to certainly see Wabisa be able to sit the bench a little more, get a little more rest. He played a ton of minutes, but I think you're going to see Wabisa and Cartier on the floor together. And I think it's going to work. And it's going to give Mike Young a lot of options. The talent coming in is going to give him more options. I think they're a year or two away from really being the program they want to be. But I think they're ahead of schedule, and I think this recruiting class takes a big step forward.
Yeah, as a group, what you want to see with a new coach is starting to sort of put their thumbprint on the school and recruiting to their style. This group, and correct me if I'm wrong, really strong from shooting from the outside, really strong defensively, and almost positionless here. The recruits coming in, you talked about them, 6'5", 180, 6'4", 180. The 2 point guards, interchangeable. It seems like there's a lot of flexibility, strong defense, which they're going to have because that's the Hokies way, and some really great 3-point shooting.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, it's not a secret. You go back to what Mike did at Wofford. He wants to do that, hopefully with a little more talent at Virginia Tech. And it starts with moving the ball. And you can't move the basketball efficiently if there's a spot on the floor where it sticks. And what I mean by that is if you've got one guy who's not a great passer or great dribbler, when the ball gets to his hands, it kind of sticks and everything slows down and everything bogs down. And that is a similarity between Mike Young and Buzz Williams. They want 5 guys on the floor who can keep it going. Now, Buzz maybe wanted to push it north and south a little bit more, get up the floor. But Mike wants, when the ball's in the half court, it to keep moving, and he doesn't want it to stick. And he's bringing in guys who can shoot, pass, dribble, so the ball won't stick.
This is great insight. One more question, then we'll get you out of here. So what is a realistic expectation for next year? This year, we had low expectations. Virginia Tech off to the fast start, battles through the ACC, ends up with the 16-15 record, 7-13 in the conference. Next year now, another year moving forward. No Nolley, but the freshmen or sophomores. Strong incoming class. You said a couple of years away. What are we looking at here next year? What do you think will be a successful year for Virginia Tech in 2020, 2021?
Well, I think they're going to be better next year in terms of the way they play. And that's not always measurable in wins and losses, but I think they're going to be a better basketball team. I think they're going to play more of what Mike Young wants. We talked about ball movement. We talked about hitting threes. We talked about defense. We talked about low turnovers. That being said, in a measurable way, and some of it's hard to tell because the ACC was down this year. Will it rebound? I think it will. So I think it'll be a little tougher. But I think this should be an NCAA bubble kind of team. I don't see them getting in, but again, so much will have to do with how the league is. But I think this is a team that should really step forward to that point where the fact that they're on the bubble isn't a surprise. It's something that we kind of saw coming, and that's kind of what I see coming for them.
Year 2 of Mike Young, Virginia Tech, huge home court advantage. Going to battle, going to play well, defense, 3-pointers. Sounds exciting to me, Mike, that's for sure. Folks, MikeBarber, fantastic job. UVA, and Virginia Tech beat writer for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Please, if you don't, you're making a mistake. Go follow him on Twitter at @RTD_MikeBarber. Mike, thanks so much here. We're getting through these teams. Virginia Tech's a big one, sort of an unknown force, and I think they can definitely make some noise. And they are a team to watch over the next couple of years because it's going to be exciting, athletic, and there's a style there with Mike Young, and that's what we want to see, especially from an upstart team like Virginia Tech, who battles every team, Duke, Virginia, everybody down the stretch. They're not afraid of anyone.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to watch the Mike Young era, and I just hope we get back to playing and competing soon.
From your lips to God's ears. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.